The first time the wind said it, Cole Ramos was hitching a gate at sundown, the chain rattling like teeth in a cold jaw. Heat still sat heavy in the creosote. Cattle had bunched up in the shade of a lone mesquite, tails switching half-heartedly, and the sky was the color of a ripe peach bitten once. He pinched the U-link hard enough to mark his thumb. He was thinking about the windmill bearings, about whether he could stretch them one more season. "We want a man tonight," the arroyo breathed. Cole's gelding lifted his head, then went back to nosing the dry weeds along the fence. Cole didn't move. He had heard coyotes in every mood, jubilant, hungry, gossiping. This wasn't that. This was words without a mouth, sifted through ocotillo and thorn. The hair on his forearms rose like grass before rain. He looked toward the Chalk Canyon white scars in the west where the hills broke open and showed their bones. "I must be tired," he said, as if saying it made it true. He swung into the saddle and rode for home, dust making a soft rope behind him. He ate out of a skillet, brisket and beans with a cut-up onion that made his eyes sting pleasantly. The old radio on the shelf whispered a baseball game from the next town over. His house was quiet in the way of homes that have only one toothbrush in them. If he leaned back and shut his eyes, he could almost hear his mother humming from the sink. He didn't let himself. "We want a man tonight." It came again the next afternoon with the desert noon thudding on the corrugated roof. Cole had climbed the tower to grease the windmill up top, the ladder hot against his jeans. He was midway down, hands slick and gritty, when the breath of it slid along the metal and into his hat brim the way a secret leans into your ear. He paused with his boot on a rung, got his breath, then climbed to ground. The notion of going to town and occupying a bar stool until midnight flashed through him, easy as a bad habit. But he knew how to be alone better than how to be noisy. He set the grease gun on the tailgate, wiped his hands on a rag already black with other wipe-offs, and looked west until the white of the canyon smudged into the afternoon. He remembered the story, the one from the trading post porch when he was still small enough to sleep through heavy talk. One of the old men with a hat like a collapsed cake had said, "Don't linger by the Chalk Canyon on a new moon night. Giant Apache girls stand on the rim. They lean down and whisper, 'We want a man tonight. Best to be home.'" The other men had laughed like windows rattling, trying to make fear into a joke. Cole's father had kept his face like weathered wood, no give, no tip. Cole saddled late, when the heat loosened its hold. He slung an old canteen from the horn, stuck a length of rope through his belt, tucked a small flint into his pocket because lighters felt lazy some nights. He left the radio off. The desert had its own play-by-play. He rode slow to keep the gelding's breath easy. Jackrabbits ghosted the edges of his vision, and once a nighthawk scooped a mosquito out of the gloaming with a sound like a zipper. The Chalk Canyon opened like a book, white pages under starlight. The petroglyphs along its lip hands, circles, animals leaning into motion held themselves in the lantern glow without asking to be explained. Cole dropped the reins and let the gelding nibble at a clump of sparse grass, his mouth working steady, as if to say, "I'll be here when you get back to yourself." Cole didn't call out. He just felt his 2 feet on the earth and waited. The night had a weight he could lean against. He thought he saw a shoulder where there hadn't been one, a long line of hair that was yucca, then not, 3 silhouettes rising from the rim like thunderheads. Lifting from the horizon tall beyond reason, their edges softened by darkness, yet not lost in it. They were not giant the way posters draw giants, all knuckle and tooth. They were giant the way mesas are, the way a silence can be in a church after a hurt. When they bent, the bending was as slow as moonrise. Their faces were made of shadow and starshine, features suggested and then let go. Their voices were women's, not young, not old, threaded through with something that made Cole want to square his shoulders. "We want a man tonight," the first said, and the word man did not feel like a challenge. It felt like a job title with a long history, a shift that came around whether you signed up for it or not. "What kind of man?" Cole asked. He heard his own voice as if the canyon had borrowed it and sent it back polished. "One with weight," said the second. Her hair carried sticks and bits of grass like a nest that had chosen her. "2 hands, a spine. A person who does not blow away when the voices get loud." "One who will witness," said the third, her gaze laid not on him but on the petroglyphs like a hand laid on a neighbor's shoulder. "Not gossip, not legend. Witness. And a truth from your own mouth." Cole stood empty-palmed. He thought of the belt in his closet, the silver conchos stamped with borrowed patterns. He thought of the tiny pair of beaded moccasins his grandfather had displayed behind glass as if showing off a family crest. He thought of the way he had once diverted the spring-up canyon with 2 sacks of concrete when drought ate the edges of his cattle. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, and was surprised by how ready the question felt. "First," said the first, "bring water. There is a spring in the fold of this wash. There is a gourd. You will find it." He knew it. Everybody knew it. He walked by the pale glow the limestone lent, the gourd cool and polished under his fingers. He smelled wet stone, the green note under all the dry. The nail holding the gourd rope had blackened with sap. He did not drink, though his throat worked on its own, remembering. He carried it back, the water steady in the belly of the gourd. "Second," said the second, after the first had tipped the gourd to her lips without letting it touch her mouth, "make a fire the size of a hat. No bigger. The desert has learned enough about big fire." Cole gathered dead chala and twigs that snapped with clean honesty. He built and rebuilt the little teepee not because it was wrong but because it calmed his hands. He struck the flint because he wanted to earn this particular flame. The ember flashed into being, then settled, then began to talk softly, a sound you wanted to lean closer to and not breathe too hard near. "Now," the third said, "say the truest thing you've been circling." Cole looked into the coal and saw the windmill turning, the way the moon sometimes wore a halo and sometimes didn't. He could have told a big truth that belonged to everybody. The river runs thinner, the winters give a different kind of cold, but he knew better. "I poured concrete into a trickle of that spring," he said, the words slowing his tongue, giving each syllable its own place to sit. "I told myself I was owed it. I took it out later, mostly. I didn't tell the people downstream I'd tried to change their water. And I've kept a belt and a pair of little shoes that aren't mine. My grandfather said he traded fairly, but he traded with a man who didn't own them to lose. I've kept them because they're beautiful and because taking things out of their glass would mean admitting everyone who came before me did not always do right." He felt the truth sit between them like a tool set down carefully. The wind leaned into him, not cold, not warm, just present. "Good," the first said. "Truth makes a place for the next thing to stand. The third thing," the second said, "is standing. We will sing. You will be between these 2 stones. Let the sound go through you. Do not ask for meaning. Meanings will find you if you stop grabbing." They put him where the canyon narrowed, 2 great blocks flanking him like the blank spaces in an old story. He planted his boots as if the ground had told him they fit. When they sang, it wasn't pretty the way choir pretty is, it was true the way a thunderhead is true. It bucked the hair along his arms and made his blood pay attention. He did not hum. He tried to remember his mother's lullaby and could only find the shape of it, so he held that shape and let their sound travel in and out of him like wind through a latched door. Time changed its gait. It went on all fours. It nosed around. When their song ended, it didn't stop so much as rest. The first reached her hand close enough that he could feel its shade. "Return what is not yours," she said. "Open what you have closed. Cut 3 strands so what must pass can pass. Hold your tongue when it oils a lie. Use your tongue when silence will rust." The second set something on the rock by the fire, a folded scarf the color of dusk, beadwork along its edge bright as small planets. "Carry this until you know where it belongs," she said. The third gave him one long look, deep as a well. It held no pity and no threat. It felt like a signature. When he turned toward his horse and then back, the rim held only yucca and stone and the shapes the canyon always wore. He walked the gelding home while the new day pushed its thumb into the eastern edge of the sky. He wrapped the belt and the tiny moccasins in the scarf and drove to the tribal office after sunrise. The building was stuccoed and square, with a bulletin board out front listing a food distribution day, a language class, a basketball clinic. Inside, a woman behind glass lifted her chin the way you do when you're about to decide how to meet somebody. "I need to return what isn't mine," Cole said, and set the bundle down like a sleeping child. When she unwrapped it, something in her face changed, not surprise, not relief, something quieter and older. She went and came back with a man whose hands were big and calm. "My grandfather traded badly," the man said, each word a fence post set straight. "He gave away what wasn't his. We've been bringing our pieces back together. I'm sorry it took me this long, Cole said. Who told you it was time? The man asked. Women, Cole said, and left it there. They didn't offer a receipt. They offered coffee. They went into a room with a map of drainages pinned up and spoke about water, about the spring, about the way men think fences are forever until they aren't. They made a plan to meet a week later at the canyon. When the week came, Cole brought cutters and a post-hole digger, because if you don't bring tools you invite talk to stand around and get too big. He followed others to the spring and waited for direction that wasn't his to give. Under a sun polite enough to hide behind a cloud now and again, they pulled the leftover concrete, rearranged stone with a care that made his chest ache, and cut 3 strands of a fence that had been stopping everything but dust. When he lifted the slack wire free, a pronghorn on the far side froze and then slipped through like water slipping between fingers. Someone laughed soft, not to scare the moment. Cole felt something unknot in his belly he hadn't even known was tied. After that, the whisper didn't go away. It lost its spook and took on the steady cadence of a job you learn and keep doing. We want a man tonight became, in him, show up. Carry weight. Witness. He showed up at a county meeting where a developer in clean boots wanted to dynamite a trail into the canyon and call it adventure. Cole stood and said, "Those stones are a history I can read and a history I can't. Both belong to people who were not asked. Don't make a postcard out of a place that is a prayer." His voice shook once. He let it. He sat down and felt like he'd put a post in proper. He started noticing where wire made no sense anymore. He took down a corner a long-dead neighbor had put up to keep a dispute alive. He asked permission from people he'd once ignored. He learned to say I was wrong and not crumple, and to say nothing when saying things would only put his stamp on something better left unnamed. Summer threw a fire over the ridge. Crews came in with their tools clipped and their faces grimed. Cole hauled water coolers and didn't fuss. One of the hotshots wiped sweat with his sleeve and grinned. "You live out here on purpose." Cole said, "On purpose now," and the kid clinked his bottle to Cole's like they'd agreed on something important. One evening, months later, his neighbor parked under his mesquite and came around back with 2 beers. Rena Ruiz had been quiet since she returned from her last deployment, a soldier's posture softened by the desert in small ways she let no one remark on. She set the beer beside him and sat on the steps without asking. "You ever hear the canyon talk?" she asked after a while. "All the time," Cole said. "Depends on which set of ears you're using. Last night, it said it wanted a man." She said the word without flinch or smirk. "I wanted to tell it I'm not built to fit its word. Then I thought maybe the canyon's not picky about whoever shows up. I checked fence anyway, found a calf hung up and got it loose. It bawled like I'd done it a personal wrong, then ran to its mama. Felt like the right kind of job." "That's the one," Cole said. He told her about the spring, about the belt and the tiny shoes, about standing in the stones while a song rearranged the air. He didn't say giants. He didn't have to. Rena listened like good ground takes rain. "It's funny," she said, tipping her beer and watching the foam recede. "I got tired of being told what a man is by people who only know holler and swagger. Maybe a man, in the canyon's mouth, is whoever will plant their feet and keep not lying." They sat until the bats passed the shift owls. Off down the wash, something moved the air and the scent of damp rock came up, a promise made and kept somewhere they couldn't see. Cole lifted the scarf to his face and breathed cedar long enough to feel a hand on his back that wasn't there. When the whisper came, it folded itself around them like a worn blanket. "We want a man tonight," it said, and there was no sting in it, only the steady invitation of work you know you can do. "I'll go," Rena said, standing with the practiced grace of someone who had learned how to rise with gear strapped on. She offered him a hand and he took it, letting her pull him up though his knees still worked. "You don't need me," he said. "I'll take you anyway," she replied, grinning like cashing a small check. "In case there are more than 3 strands." They walked without hurrying. The canyon kept its own light, a softness that didn't need a lantern to be seen. Coyotes argued philosophy far off, and a nightjar stitched the sky with a sound you could lose if you called it music. When they reached the white stones, they stood and stood, and if a shadow leaned down over them or a voice braided into theirs, it did it the way all true things do, without demanding applause. They cut wire where wire had forgotten why it was there. They moved a rock that had locked tight a small flow. They sat when their legs asked, and got up when the night did. They did not explain themselves to the dark. The dark understood. Cole thought of how the first whisper had rattled him like a can thrown at a dog, and how this one laid a hand at his neck and made him hold still. He did not feel chosen. He felt useful. He felt heavy in the right way, able to put his weight where it belonged. Toward dawn, the canyon thinned to pale. The world began to draw its edges again. Rena touched his sleeve and pointed to the new gap where the wire bent back like a smile. A pronghorn watched from a distance with the patience of someone who knows time circles back. Cole nodded and did not try to speak more than that. "You hear anything else?" Rena asked as they turned toward home. "Only everything," Cole said, and meant it. They followed the wash as it braided out onto the flats, boots whispering in the dust. Behind them, the chalk kept its white, and above, the sky began its long, daily work of becoming blue. The desert held its breath a little longer and let them go, the way a teacher watches the door after class, letting the last lesson land without words.